Convoy is prepped. Systems online. Heli presence online. Awaiting your orders. That's the last of them, Commander. On my way, Commander. Fighter retrieval commencing.
under attack. Cargo scope deployed. Scan detected.
basically aggressively scrape everything posted on the site to feed into OpenAI's tech. Reddit co-founder Alex Ohanian felt in his bones the deal was wrong. It's a less noble version of what Reddit co-founder Aaron Swartz was targeted by law enforcement for. Swartz wanted to open the knowledge up to everyone. Altman wanted to put it in his product. In 2014, Altman promised that he and other investors would give 10% of Reddit's value back to the Reddit community. That never happened due to regulatory issues. But just like Reddit's data going to OpenAI, a look at the areas Altman's wealth is invested in show a deep connection to other needs of the organization. He's invested in AI networking equipment companies, thermal battery companies, and even companies mining the rare earth metals that server farms require. And once it's all built, Altman will profit off the problems AI creates. We're going to focus on three: rising energy demands and costs, misuse like fraud and deepfakes, and job loss and economic collapse. Altman says again and again that OpenAI needs more power. The, quote, audacious long-term goal is to build 250 gigawatts of capacity by 2033. That much compute would require as much electricity as 1.5 billion people, the equivalent of the entire population of India. But Altman has a solution. Since they first met in the early 2000s, Peter Thiel and Sam Altman had a shared interest, investing in nuclear power. Which isn't inherently bad, of course. Nuclear can be an extremely efficient and clean form of energy. But Thiel and Altman want to own it. Altman is invested in Helion and Oklo. Helion is working to build the first ever nuclear fusion power plant, a type of energy creation that many scientists say won't work. And Oklo is building microreactors, literally truck-sized nuclear reactors, which is a bit concerning considering this investment strategy.
Part of our model is make the cost of mistakes really low, and then make a lot of mistakes.
But for now, Oklo hasn't figured their reactors out yet, and are just using gas to keep up with the promises they made.
Nuclear startup Oklo and natural gas firm Liberty Energy today announcing a partnership to provide energy to large-scale customers.
Altman is also invested in multiple companies offering protection against AI bad actors, identity verification to prevent deepfakes, and even companies offering insurance for losses due to AI scams and hacking. That's like Batman not making any money off of crime fighting, but then selling Batmobile drove into my house insurance, while also running the Uber for henchmen startup that the Riddler uses and selling the Joker white makeup. One other big promise Altman makes is that when the AI he sees as inevitable makes many jobs obsolete, it'll create so much wealth that it can be shared with everyone, just like his smaller scale Reddit promise that turned out to be bullshit. And in 2024, he announced the product that'd supposedly offer that shared abundance.
WorldCoin.
WorldCoin is a technology company and cryptocurrency funded by all the usual suspects of techno-fascism. WorldCoin's backers say it can be a way to give out some form of universal basic income when AI starts replacing jobs.
I think this idea that we have a global currency that is outside of the control of any government is a super logical and important step on the tech tree.
But it also sells itself as a solution to identity verification problems created by AI. They want to use these orbs as a method of trusted identity sharing. And you don't get your universal basic income until you scan your eyes into the orbs. And like many of Altman's other projects, from Looped to ChatGPT, it requires universal adoption to be of any business use. A currency and identification system are pretty useless if other people don't use them. So again, Altman is making an offer. Give us your identity, and we'll give you cryptocurrency. It's a classic deal. I'll fix everything if you sign over everything. Just trust me, bro. It's almost like Altman wants to build a whole other economy, just in case the one we have now falls apart. Well, we'll get to that. In 2019, OpenAI gave up any pretense of being non-profit and started a for-profit branch, then spun the for-profit out into its own entity in 2024. That for-profit organization has none of the same legal responsibilities as the nonprofit did, and brought in new investors like Microsoft, which invested $13 billion, which OpenAI largely spent on Microsoft products. And it's not just Microsoft. NVIDIA has promised to invest $100 billion in OpenAI over the next few years, money that OpenAI will spend buying NVIDIA chips. OpenAI has similar circular deals with AMD, the Qatari government, and Larry Ellison's Oracle.
How about the 20 bucks? Well, I only got 10, so here's 10, I owe you 10. Hey, Mo, you owe me 20. Here's 10, I'll owe you 10. And you owe me 20. Here's 10, I owe you 10. Here's 10, I owe you. Here's 10, I owe you. Here's 10, I owe you. Good, now we're all even.
The entire economy is tied to the success of Alden's project.
We might screw it up. Like, this is the bet that we're making, and we're taking a risk about that.
Who is the we taking the bet? Here's OpenAI's CFO.
Banks, private equity, maybe even governmental, the ways governments could come to bear.
Meaning like a federal subsidy or something?
Meaning like, just first of all, the backstop guarantee that allows the financing to happen.
Through all of that stammering, the CFO of OpenAI is making a clear point. The government, your tax dollars, are responsible for saving the AI project. That's more eggs in the basket. And that basket is based on the promises of Sam Altman, who, as we've illustrated, lies and breaks promises a lot. So if we really look at the basket, maybe we shouldn't have been putting all those eggs in there.
And it gets worse. While we were editing this video, news broke that OpenAI is seeking a $750 billion valuation and is in talks with Amazon for a $10 billion investment. That's money that OpenAI would spend on Amazon infrastructure. So I'm gonna need more eggs.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to support more of our quality journalism, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there are more stories like this one you want to see us cover, reach out to us at stories@perfectunion.us.
Normal now. That's the funniest part. Watch them. Listen to the forced laughter, the sudden politeness. The way conversations change when you enter the frame. That's not respect. That's recalibration. That's people realizing the math they used to understand the world no longer works because you broke the equation. They keep asking themselves when it happened. Was it that one decision? That one refusal to fold? That moment you stopped explaining yourself? They want a clean origin story because clean stories feel containable. But what they don't get is this wasn't a single ignition. It was a long burn. A quiet accumulation of moments where you chose pain over comfort, truth over approval, isolation over dilution. You didn't snap, you forged. That's why they're scared. Because monsters they can understand. Saints they can exploit. But someone who can move between light and dark on command. Someone who can smile while calculating outcomes 3 steps ahead. Someone who can be compassionate without being weak and ruthless without being reckless. That breaks their mental models. That short-circuits their sense of safety. You see, they rely on predictability, the way lungs rely on oxygen. They need to know how you'll react so they can plan around you, manipulate you, neutralize you. And you took that away. You became situational, adaptive, alive. One day you're silent, letting them underestimate you. The next day you speak once, and the room rearranges itself. That's not luck. That's mastery born from pressure. Every time life tried to crush you, it taught you something instead. How to read intention in micro-expressions. How to hear fear behind confidence. How to recognize when someone's power is borrowed, not owned. You learned where people bluff, where systems leak, where egos crack. And now you're walking around with X-ray vision in a world full of glass structures pretending they're steel. They can feel it when you look at them. They can't tell what you see, but they know you see something. This is the phase they never prepare for, the aftermath, the part where the threat isn't loud anymore, the part where you don't need to prove anything, because the proof already exists. That's when control freaks lose their minds, because they can't fight what isn't flailing, they can't suppress what isn't begging, they can't shame what isn't seeking validation. You're not chasing them. You're not explaining yourself. You're not even reacting the way they expect. And that silence, that composure, that's louder than any outburst ever was. They keep waiting for you to self-destruct, to overplay your hand, to become the villain they can point at and say, "See, we were right, but you're too disciplined for that now, too aware." You understand that real power doesn't rush. Real power lets others reveal themselves while it stays still. Real power knows when to strike, and more importantly, when not to. That's the evolution, from survival to strategy. You used to react emotionally because you were hurt. Now you respond deliberately because you're clear. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be feared either. Both are optional side effects. What you need is momentum, and you've got it. Quiet, relentless momentum that doesn't announce itself until it's already reshaped the terrain. They're starting to notice patterns now. Wins stacking where losses were expected. Doors opening where walls used to be. People choosing you without fully knowing why. That's when paranoia sets in. Because influence that can't be traced is the most dangerous kind. You're not commanding armies. You're not shouting orders. You're simply existing at a frequency that disrupts insecure systems. You're proof that their ceilings were imaginary, and nothing enrages gatekeepers more than someone who walks through a door they swore didn't exist. And here's the part they really don't want to admit. You didn't take anything from them. You didn't steal power. You outgrew the space they were trying to keep you in. That's why containment failed. You weren't breaking rules. You were operating on a different layer entirely. While they were obsessed with appearances, you were refining substance. While they were managing optics, you were building capability. While they were protecting status, you were sharpening identity. So now they're scrambling, trying to redefine you, trying to rename what happened so it doesn't threaten their worldview. But it's too late. Once someone like you sees themselves clearly, once you experience the moment where effort turns into inevitability, there's no unseeing that. You stop asking, "Can I?" and start asking, "How far?" And that question alone is enough to make fragile hierarchies shake. You didn't unleash chaos, you unleashed clarity. And clarity is ruthless. It exposes who was pretending. It exposes who was riding borrowed confidence. It exposes who only had power because you hadn't stepped into yours yet. That's why they can't contain it. Because to contain you now would require them to admit the truth. That you were never the problem. You were the variable they failed to account for. And as you stand there, calm, grounded, alert, you can feel it settling in. This isn't a peak. This isn't the end. This is the baseline of who you are now. The world didn't end when you pulled it off. It adjusted. And from here on out, every move you make carries weight they can't ignore. Let them panic. Let them whisper. Let them pretend they're still in control. You already know the truth. Whatever you unleashed, it wasn't reckless. It wasn't accidental. It was inevitable. And now comes the strangest part. The calm after ignition. Not silence, not peace. Something colder, sharper. The kind of stillness that makes people uneasy because they can't tell whether it's restraint or preparation. They keep expecting fireworks, a victory lap, some loud declaration, so they can finally point and say, "There, that's it, that's the threat." But you deny them that comfort. You move like someone who's already adjusted to the aftermath, like someone who knows the blast already did its job, and that terrifies them more than noise ever could. Because when a person doesn't celebrate, it means they were never gambling. You weren't hoping this would work. You knew. That's the detail that's haunting them now. The realization that while they were watching the surface, your words, your posture, your visible struggle, you were operating on a deeper layer entirely. You weren't reacting to circumstances. You were shaping probability. You were learning how outcomes bend when pressure is applied in the right places, at the right time, with the right amount of restraint. Pain was your teacher. Isolation was your laboratory. Doubt was your sharpening stone. You didn't escape the darkness. You studied it. You learned how fear thinks. You learned how power hides. You learned how people reveal themselves the moment they believe they're safe. And now you carry that knowledge quietly, like a concealed blade they forgot to check for. That's why they feel exposed around you. They don't know what you see, but they know you see through something. Their confidence leaks when they talk to you. Their tone shifts. Their jokes land softer. Their authority feels thinner. You don't challenge them, and somehow that's worse, because you're not trying to win arguments anymore. You're measuring relevance, and some of them are realizing, for the first time, that they're not as necessary as they thought. This is where the duality sharpens, where saint and psychopath stop being opposites and start being tools. You can be patient without being passive. You can be dangerous without being cruel. You can forgive without forgetting. You can stand in the light without surrendering what the dark taught you.